My younger brother lost his life in a sudden workplace accident. His wife took the compensation money, left their daughter at a care facility, and disappeared. My husband and I decided to adopt my niece and raise her as our own. 12 years later, the mother who abandoned her child came back to see her, now a popular young woman. My name is Beatrix, and I'm 47 years old. My husband, Zeph, is the same age, and we were high school classmates. This is the story of my family and me. Neither of us went to college. Zeph went to culinary school, and I attended a vocational school to become a child care provider. We met again at a high school reunion when we were 21. At the time, we had just graduated and started working. About half of our classmates were still in college, but Zeph and I bonded over our shared experience of entering the workforce early. Soon after, we started dating. We got married at 25. Zeph worked in a Western-style restaurant, and I worked at a daycare center. I had a younger brother who was 2 years younger than me. His name was Merritt. Merritt and I grew up in a single-parent household. Our parents divorced when we were young, and neither of us remembered much about our father. Our mother wasn't suited for parenting or domestic life. She worked in nightlife establishments to support us, but she'd often come home drunk, get violent, and date one man after another. Sometimes her boyfriends would even hit us. She was what you'd call a harsh parent. Lately, I've been surprised by online posts claiming that parents who won't pay for braces, eyelid surgery, or hair treatments are strict. In our house, there wasn't even money for tuition. I had to work part-time while attending vocational school. Merritt didn't even go to high school. He wasn't a fan of studying, but the bigger reason was that Mom, growing older, couldn't earn much from her nightlife job anymore. We just didn't have the financial stability for it. Merritt started working immediately after middle school as a demolition worker for one of Mom's acquaintances. He earned a decent income and even helped me pay for my schooling. When I began working as a child care provider, Mom stopped working altogether. She probably felt too old to continue her previous job, but she didn't even consider taking a part-time position. Instead, she relied on Merritt's and my earnings while doing minimal housework and going out drinking. Looking back, I think my mother was the real definition of toxic mother. She passed away when I was 23, and Merritt was 21 from liver disease. Why did we get stuck with a mother like her? I wish we had a normal mom. I'd thought that my whole life, but when she was gone, I still felt sad. Our father was nowhere to be found, and we had no contact with Mom's relatives. Merritt and I were left almost entirely on our own, maybe out of loneliness. Merritt got married a year after Mom's passing, at the age of 22. Ironically, the woman he chose was eerily similar to her mother in personality and vibe. Her name was Gabrielle, and she was 21. She had light brown hair, a flashy hairstyle, heavy makeup, and a preference for revealing clothing. When Merritt brought her home to introduce her, her first comment to me was, "Wow, Beatrix, you're so plain." Well, compared to her, most people would look plain. I thought it but didn't say it. Needless to say, my first impression of her wasn't great. Honestly, I don't have a good feeling about her. I told my brother truthfully, "Yay, she's flashy, but she's actually pretty devoted." He replied, "Well, if you're happy, that's all that matters," I said, deciding not to press the issue further. After all, marriage is a personal matter, even between siblings. They had a small photo wedding and held a modest reception with friends. Afterwards, Merritt moved out of the rundown apartment we had shared after our mother's death and rented a 2-bedroom condo nearby. However, Gabrielle's devotion only lasted until the wedding. Once they were married, she became the worst kind of wife, spending Merritt's earnings on her outings, neglecting housework, and leaving everything to him. I only found out about this over a year after their wedding. Merritt, knowing I had been somewhat opposed to his marriage, probably hesitated to complain about his wife to me. One day, Merritt called me for help. He had come down with the flu, couldn't get out of bed, and hadn't eaten for an entire day. "Where's Gabrielle?" I asked. "She left yesterday for a 2-night trip with her friends," he replied. "But weren't you already sick yesterday?" "Yea, but even if she stayed, she wouldn't have taken care of me anyway." What do you mean by that?" When I arrived, I was shocked to see the state of their home. The place was a mess. The kitchen was dirty, and the fridge was practically empty. It was immediately clear Gabrielle wasn't doing much around the house. I wanted to take Merritt to the hospital, but he hated doctors and refused to go. Instead, I made some chicken soup, fed him, and gave him medicine to bring down his fever. The first time I met her, I thought Gabrielle was just like our late mother. Her vibe, her personality, even the way she neglects housework and spends all her time going out. "It's all the same," I said to my brother as I tidied up the messy apartment. "No way." "Are you serious?" Merritt murmured softly, almost to himself, before drifting off to sleep. Even if he unconsciously sought a resemblance to our mother, it was unfortunate that he had been drawn to her worst qualities. I couldn't help but think he had poor judgment when it came to women. After that, I cleaned up the apartment, scrubbed the kitchen, and made a pot of chicken soup. I left a glass of water, some medicine, and a note next to his bed that said, "There's chicken soup in the pot. Make sure to eat." Then I went home. Merritt, being naturally resilient, seemed much better the next day, which gave me some relief. Gabrielle didn't call to thank me after returning from her trip. Well, I hadn't expected her to anyway. Instead, on his next day off, Merritt stopped by with a cake as a gesture of thanks. Once the chaotic years following my mother's death and Merritt's marriage settled down, I married Zeph at 25. Like Merritt, Zeph and I didn't want to spend much on a wedding or reception, so we had a photo wedding and held a small reception at the restaurant where Zeph worked. During the reception, Gabrielle announced that she was pregnant. Although Merritt and I no longer had parents, I felt a deep sense of joy at the thought of our family growing. I had always hoped to have at least 2 children of my own. While Gabrielle's pregnancy announcement was exciting, I couldn't help but feel a bit uneasy. Could she really handle being a mother? Still, I told myself not to worry. Sometimes, people surprise you when faced with responsibility, and I hoped that would be the case with Gabrielle. Before getting married, I had visited a gynecologist due to my irregular and heavy periods, hoping to find some relief. However, the doctor's words shocked me to my core. "In your case, the shape of your uterus makes conception highly unlikely." Those words left me feeling utterly devastated. "I think we should call off the wedding. It looks like I can't have children," I told Zeph. But he said, "I'm not marrying you for children. I want to marry you because I want to be with you, Beatrix." His words made me incredibly happy, but deep down, a lingering sadness and guilt about not being able to have children remained. So, during our wedding reception, Gabrielle's pregnancy announcement filled me with envy. Even so, I resolved to shower my future niece or nephew with love, and hoped that Merritt and Gabrielle would build a happy family together. Their baby was born soon after, a beautiful little girl named Candy. She looked a lot like Merritt and was absolutely adorable. Merritt doted on her, and Gabrielle appeared to take good care of her too. The 3 of them often went out together, dressed up and looking like the perfect young family. However, I sometimes felt that Gabrielle treated her more like an accessory than a child. Still, I adored my niece and often bought her clothes and toys that I thought she'd like, visiting Merritt's house whenever I could. But then, everything changed in an instant. Merritt was suddenly killed in an accident. It was right before Candy was about to start elementary school. Merritt was caught under a collapsed crane at a demolition site. He was only 31 years old when I received the news. The shock was so overwhelming that I barely remembered anything from that time. Growing up under a harsh parent, Merritt and I had always protected each other during our childhood. I couldn't have endured it without him. I wanted him to be happier than anyone else. The company admitted their negligence, so workers' compensation will be provided, along with a settlement. Gabrielle and Candy's lives should be financially stable, at least. That's a small relief, Zeph said. I remember hearing his words as if they were about someone else's life. It's true. They're the ones who lost a husband and father. They're going through much more than I am. I didn't begin to think this way until over a week after Merritt's funeral. Candy, too young to grasp the permanence of death, believed her father had simply gone far away. "When is Daddy coming back?" she asked me, and I couldn't bring myself to answer. Gabrielle seemed more composed than I had expected, which initially gave me some relief, but I couldn't have been more wrong. About 3 months after Merritt's death, I received a sudden call from a children's welfare facility. "We haven't been able to reach Candy's mom," the staff said, leaving me utterly confused. To understand what was going on, Zeph and I visited the facility. They explained that after Merritt's passing, Gabrielle said she was mentally unfit to raise a child on her own and had left Candy in their care. She listed me as the emergency contact, which is why they called me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There were no signs that Gabrielle was struggling mentally, and she never discussed anything with me. When I went to the apartment where Merritt's family had lived, it was completely empty. I contacted Gabrielle's family, but they said she hadn't visited them, and they had no idea where she was. Worried that her mental state might truly have deteriorated, and that she might do something drastic, I was startled when Gabrielle's mother sighed and said, "Oh, she hasn't come here, and I have no idea where she's gone," she said with a sigh, "but I doubt she's in trouble." She told me cheerfully about the money she got after Merritt's death. She's always been self-centered, but I thought marriage and motherhood had changed her a bit. She abandoned her child at a facility and disappeared. I snapped. "Oh well, I guess her nature didn't change after all. But just so you know, we can't take Candy in either. Life stuff for us too, you see. Now, if you're offering $5,000 a month for her care, maybe we'd consider it." That's when I realized Gabrielle was a reflection of her mother. My anger surged. "You don't have to worry. I'll never ask for your help," I said before slamming the phone down. I couldn't stop crying. "Let's adopt Candy and raise her ourselves," Zeph said, holding me as I wept. Because of my difficulties conceiving, Zeph and I had long let go of the dream of having our own child. But perhaps, because of our struggles, we could offer Candy the love and stability she deserved. That's how Candy became our adopted daughter. Having adored her since the day she was born, becoming a family felt natural. At first, Candy would ask, "Did Mommy go to be with Daddy? Are they coming back together?" Her questions broke our hearts, but over time, she stopped asking. It seemed she began to understand that her father was never coming back. I showed Candy photos of Merritt as a child and shared stories about him. "Daddy was your little brother, wasn't he?" Candy asked one day. "Yes, he was. I loved him very much," I replied. "I loved Daddy too," Candy said with a sad smile. Then she murmured something that caught me off guard. "But I like you more than Mommy." "What?" I asked, startled. Mommy always made me wear clothes I didn't like and took me places I didn't want to go. And when she was in a bad mood, she was mean to me. I remembered how Gabrielle often dressed Candy up and paraded her around. I used to think she treated her like an accessory. But Candy wasn't an accessory, she was a little girl, a human being. After living together, I realized Candy preferred sporty, comfortable clothes over frilly dresses with lots of ruffles. "What do you mean by mean?" I asked gently. "Sometimes, after Daddy scolded her, she'd pinch me when he wasn't looking," Candy said quietly. "That's awful. Why would she do that?" I exclaimed, unable to hide my shock. "Usually after Daddy told her to clean up or cook dinner," Candy explained. "That was 100% Gabrielle's fault. And yet, she took her frustrations out on a child. And you know what?" Candy added. "Your food tastes better than Mommy's. And Uncle Zeph's food is even better." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Zeph's cooking was professional level, so even I couldn't argue with that. "Well then," I said with a smile, "how about I cook your favorite dinner tonight? Want to come shopping with me?" "Yes," Candy said excitedly. Despite the emotional scars, we gradually built a peaceful life together. By the time a year had passed, Candy began calling us Mom and Dad. Then one day, a miracle happened. Well, maybe calling it a miracle is a bit much, but it felt like one. After being told it was nearly impossible for me to have children, I found out I was pregnant. Maybe living with Candy had somehow triggered something in my body. Perhaps a shift in my hormones. I didn't know, but I was overwhelmed with joy. "Does this mean I'm going to have a little brother or sister?" Candy's face lit up with excitement at the news, but quickly darkened. "Will I become unwanted if I have a little brother or sister?" she asked hesitantly. Her question caught me completely off guard. "Why would you think that? That's absolutely not true," I said, my voice louder than I intended. "At the place I stayed before coming here, the other kids told me, your mom abandoned you. You're not wanted." Apparently, the children at the care facility had said such cruel things to her during her short stay there. Children who are hurt by adults sometimes pass that hurt on to others. It's heartbreaking, and something that should never happen. "Candy, you're not an unwanted child. It's your mom who wasn't a good adult. Some adults make mistakes, but you are not a bad or unwanted child," I said firmly, pulling her into a tight hug. Candy hugged me back and said, "I'm going to be a good big sister." When I was 33 years old, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Her name was Franny, a name that Candy chose. Candy adored her little sister, who was 7 years younger, and took great care of her. Life wasn't easy, but I continued working within my limits during the pregnancy. After Franny was born, I was fortunate enough to bring her to the daycare where I worked, allowing me to care for her while continuing my job. Candy would come to the daycare after school and play with the children, bringing joy to everyone there. Zeph, too, worked tirelessly. At 35, he opened his own Western-style restaurant. Time flew by as we enjoyed our busy but happy lives. 12 years passed since Candy became our daughter. Candy had grown into a smart, stunningly beautiful college student. Yes, I'm a proud mom. She and her younger sister, who was about to start middle school, were as close as two peas in a pod. They were an adorably loving pair of siblings. Since high school, Candy had worked part-time at Zeph's restaurant. She had even designed the restaurant's uniforms and created its website. What I didn't know was that Candy had been dancing since middle school and had become quite popular on social media through her short dance videos. Lately, she had started performing choreographed dances with her younger sister, Franny. and they were getting a lot of attention online. When she showed me the videos, I couldn't help but gush. "Oh my goodness, you two are just the cutest." I couldn't help but shout out in excitement. Merritt, unable to suppress his grin, nodded enthusiastically. What if posting videos like this leads to a flood of marriage proposals? What will we do? Zev started worrying, completely off track. No, what if some creepy guy notices them and starts stalking them? What do we do then? He added, his concerns escalating. Our daughters laughed, clearly amused. But as parents, our worries never end. One day, Zev's restaurant was featured on television as a popular dining spot. Candy's dance videos had unexpectedly gone viral, making her somewhat of a trending topic online. Zev and I were completely flustered by the sudden attention. Candy remained unfazed and said, "Dad, Mom, you're overreacting. Trends and buzz like this come and go so quickly. People will stop talking about it soon." However, the attention didn't die down as she predicted. She received interview requests from online news outlets and even offers from talent agencies to become a professional entertainer. Candy began to feel conflicted about her future and what path she should take. "I was thinking about studying social work in college and pursuing a career in that field. Or maybe taking over Dad's restaurant," Candy said thoughtfully. "What? Dad's restaurant is mine to take over?" Franny chimed in, turning the conversation into a playful yet chaotic debate. "Trying to restore some order," I said. "Taking over the restaurant is something to consider far in the future. While you're young, it's okay to explore your passions and try new things." With that one suggestion, Candy decided to join a talent agency and began her career as an entertainer, ensuring that it didn't interfere with her studies. Zev and I had completely forgotten about her past. To us, Candy was wholly our daughter, and the existence of her biological mother had been erased from our memories. We never imagined that Candy's rising fame could bring trouble. But one day, out of nowhere, someone I never wanted to see again appeared. That evening, Candy came home from her part-time job, visibly shaken. "Mom, I think someone's been following me. Ever since I left the store, they've been trailing me," she said, her voice trembling. My blood ran cold. "What? That's dangerous. It could be a stalker." "Should we call the police?" I asked, panicking. "But it's not a man, it's a woman," she replied. "A woman," I said, completely confused. Just then, the doorbell rang. Standing at the door was a woman who looked noticeably older, though her flashy hairstyle and heavy makeup hadn't changed. However, her clothing was shabby and unkempt. "You're Gabrielle, aren't you? What are you doing here?" I asked, barely containing my fury. I wanted to scream at her, throw water in her face, and slam the door shut. But before I could act, Gabrielle ignored me entirely and turned to Candy, who was standing behind me. "Oh, Candy, you've grown so much. I've missed you so much," Gabrielle said, tears streaming down her face. "Who is this?" Candy asked in a cold voice. "What are you saying?" "I'm your real mother," Gabrielle exclaimed. "Oh, you mean the deadbeat mother who abandoned me years ago?" "Yay, I've heard about her," Candy said coldly. "What?" Gabrielle stammered, clearly taken aback. She must have expected a warmer reception. Had she truly believed she would be welcomed with open arms? "If you wanted to see me so badly, why didn't you come back for 12 years? I asked sharply. "I've been through a lot," Gabrielle replied, her tone defensive and unapologetic. "Everyone faces difficulties in life, but that's no excuse." "Gabrielle," I said, my voice growing harsher, "you took all the money Merritt left behind, didn't you?" "I don't remember. That was so long ago," Besides, it wasn't even that much, she said dismissively. Not that much, I retorted. According to Merritt's company, there was around $1 million from the workers' compensation and legal settlement. That money was meant to cover raising Candy until she became an adult. I didn't want Candy to hear this, but she was old enough now, and this was a matter that directly concerned her. $1 million, Candy said, visibly shocked. That was calculated based on Dad's hard work, his lifetime earnings, and what was needed to raise me. It wasn't money for you to squander all by yourself, was it? Candy asked, her voice calm but piercing. I was grieving. I lost him, and it broke me, Gabrielle said weakly. Oh, I see. And that grief forced you to dump me at a facility and run off with the money. Candy shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. How dare you? You have no idea what I went through. How can you talk to your mother like that? Gabrielle yelled, trying to assert authority. What struggles could this woman possibly claim? I remember it clearly, Candy said. Right after Dad died, you were happily shopping like you didn't have a care in the world. You cried fake tears to the staff at the facility, acting like you were so miserable. And then you waved at me and said, "See you," before disappearing. This was the first time I had heard this story from Candy. My anger boiled over, and I felt like my head was going to explode. That's ridiculous. You must have dreamed it up. Children make up stories all the time. Gabrielle stammered, her voice shaky. I couldn't hold back any more. You abandoned your own daughter, took all the money. And who knows what you spent it on. Now that the money's gone and your daughter is famous, you show up here to mooch off her. Is that it? I shouted. What? She's my daughter. Isn't it natural for a child to take care of their parent? Gabrielle fired back, her voice filled with indignation. If that's the case, then isn't it natural for a parent to love and care for the child they gave birth to? I yelled, my fury spilling out. Without another word, I grabbed the pitcher of iced tea from the fridge and threw it directly in Gabrielle's face. How dare you? Gabrielle cried, stumbling backward in shock. If you don't leave my doorstep right now, I'm calling the police, I said coldly. Before I could say more, Candy stepped forward and continued, Goodbye, old hag. Franny suddenly shouted from behind us, startling me. Go home, you witch, she added, her voice defiant and fearless. Gabrielle, drenched in iced tea that had soaked through her cheap white blouse, turned and fled, practically running away. Afterward, as we cleaned the soaked entryway, I laughed and said to Franny, calling her a witch was spot on. But you shouldn't say that outside, okay? Franny grinned, but Candy's face fell. I can't believe I came from someone like her, she said sadly. I felt a pang of guilt and sadness. I wish I could have been the one to give birth to you, I said, my heart heavy with emotion. As I was thinking that, Franny suddenly said, Candy and I are Merritt and Beatrix's kids. That witch has nothing to do with us. And hugged Candy tightly. I wrapped my arms around both of them and said, That's right. You're both our precious children, mine and Merritt's. At that moment, Zeph came home. He was stunned to see his wife and two daughters crying and hugging each other in the middle of a water-soaked entryway. He had no idea what had happened. We thought that getting rid of Gabrielle had put an end to the ordeal. But we couldn't have been more wrong. From that day onward, hateful comments began flooding Candy's social media accounts, her talent agency's official website, and even Zeph's restaurant page. The posts were vile and blatantly false, accusing Candy of abandoning her real mother and sleeping with people to get work. Other comments claimed Zeph's restaurant reused leftover food. The malice was obvious. and so was the identity of the culprit. At first, we tried to ignore it, but the persistence and sheer volume of the comments made it impossible to let go, and I was furious. Just as I was preparing to contact the police, something unexpected happened. Candy was invited as a guest on a popular video streamer's channel. During the broadcast, the host brought up the issue casually, saying, "So, I've heard you've been dealing with a lot of harassment online lately." Later, Candy told me she had specifically asked the host during the pre-show meeting to mention it. "Yes, that's true," Candy replied calmly. "The accusations are completely baseless and untrue. But here's the shocking part. The person behind those posts is actually my biological mother." "What?" The host was visibly stunned, and I could imagine the audience was just as shocked. "I hate even calling her my mother," Candy said. "She's the woman who gave birth to me. After my dad died in an accident, a significant amount of compensation money came through. She took that money, abandoned me at a facility, and disappeared without a trace. Now that I've gained a little fame, she suddenly showed up at my house, clearly having spent all the money, hoping to mooch off me." Her tone was steady and composed as she recounted the events. "The truth is, my dad's sister, Beatrix, is the one who raised me. To me, she and her husband, Merritt, are my real parents. Honestly, I'm grateful I wasn't raised by that so-called mother. My life is better because of it." Hearing this, I felt tears well up in my eyes. Zeph, sitting beside me, was also misty-eyed. Franny, on the other hand, clenched her fists and cheered quietly. "Yes, go, Candy, tell them more," she continued. "She showed up out of the blue, claiming she'd always wanted to see me. Well, Beatrix, Franny, and I managed to send her packing, but now, out of spite, she's been writing all these disgusting comments everywhere. It's been a huge nuisance, and I just want it to stop. So, everyone watching, please don't believe any of those lies." The host responded with admiration. "Well, thank you for sharing something so difficult. No one's going to believe those comments after hearing this." Candy smiled and said, "It's fine. I know there are people out there struggling with toxic parents, but because my biological mother was the way she was, I had the chance to be raised by Beatrix and Merritt, who are my real parents, and to grow up with my amazing sister Franny. I'm genuinely happy with my life now." Zeph and I broke down in tears, overwhelmed with emotion, and even Franny wiped at her eyes with her hand. The video from Candy's interview went viral, and a group of justice-driven viewers took it upon themselves to identify the person behind the hateful comments and publicly shame her. Gabrielle, driven by her craving for attention, had posted heavily edited selfies on her social media accounts, making it easy for people to connect the dots. "I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I promise. But please, tell people to stop harassing me. It feels like everyone is watching me, and I'm terrified." Gabrielle's trembling voice came through the phone one day. She sounded utterly broken. "There's nothing I or Candy can do about it now. Once something spreads and escalates like this, calming it down is nearly impossible." She must have felt terrified by the relentless attacks from strangers online. She deleted all her social media accounts and vanished. Still, she's probably haunted by the fear that someone out there recognizes her face, making it scary for her to even step outside. Maybe getting reported to the police and facing punishment would have been better, I briefly wondered. But considering everything Gabrielle had done, this was her own doing. I couldn't bring myself to feel any sympathy for her. Perhaps she should just live quietly somewhere, avoiding all human interaction. Or maybe if she took off her makeup, no one would even recognize her, I thought with a twinge of malicious amusement. Candy had posted a comment on her own social media account. "I really appreciate everyone standing up for me, but please don't do anything illegal on my behalf." She was addressing the chaos surrounding the situation. But hey, now she can't go around claiming I'm her daughter anymore, so I guess it's all good in the end. Candy laughed as she said this. "Yay, and your fan base has grown too. Maybe I could debut as Candy's little sister someday." Her cheeky younger sister chimed in. "Please, don't give me more things to worry about," I said with a sigh. But my husband, ever the laid-back one, added, "You know, the beautiful sisters angle might actually make you two quite popular." He said this with such a carefree attitude. Apparently, this whole incident had brought more customers to my husband's restaurant. "Well, if they come out of curiosity at first but end up becoming regulars after trying my food, I'd be thrilled," he said, looking rather pleased with himself. And honestly, he had every reason to be confident. His cooking truly was amazing. "Wait, wasn't Franny supposed to take over your restaurant? Are you planning to become a celebrity instead?" I teased her. Franny stuck out her tongue playfully and grinned. "You never know what life has in store. I think it's better to focus on what you love now, rather than tying yourself to a future plan," Candy said, her tone unexpectedly mature. "That's true. As long as you're happy, your father and I don't care about anything else." "We do care. You and Dad have to be happy too. As long as you're happy, we're happy too. That's just how parents are." I wished my younger brother could see how much our daughter had grown. Even now, thinking about him brings tears to my eyes. "Mom, you're crying again." "Honestly, you cry more than I do. And I'm the kid here," Franny teased me. "Happy tears don't count. You can cry as much as you want when you're happy," I replied. As I sniffled, Candy handed me a tissue with a gentle smile.